For the second straight game, playoff Dyami showed up and helped get the Commanders over the top in a 2-score win over the Detroit Lions. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. I'm also helping out with WUSA 9's local coverage of the team this year. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. I thank you for being here today. And if you're an everydayer, I appreciate you especially for coming through every single day. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, in which we are going to hear Dan Quinn, or rather we're going to talk about Dan Quinn, talking about his conversation with Brian Robinson Jr., how he helped get him back on track in this divisional round win over the Detroit Lions. We're going to hand out some game balls. We're going to talk about wanting a little bit more out of Frankie Luvu, but we're going to start it all off with talking about playoff Dyami coming through again for the Washington Commanders in a 2-score win over the Detroit Lions. And we're going to do all of that thanks to our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. For the second straight game this postseason, playoff Dyami showed up and helped get the Commanders over the top in a 2-score divisional round win over the Detroit Lions. That's how we're going to kick off our after-action review. AAR, every time we do this, we start off the same way. What was supposed to happen? What happened? 3 things we want to sustain moving forward. 3 things we want to improve on moving forward. And for this one, the Washington Commanders were supposed to lose by 9.5 points. By more than one score, they were supposed to fall to the Detroit Lions. The over-under in this game was supposed to be right around 55.5 points. My prediction was that the Commanders would win. Clearly, they would cover that spread, but they would do 3 points better. They would beat the Lions 24-21. I thought both of these teams might try to get ahead, drain the clock a little bit, extend some drives, do all those things. Insider score prediction, a little bit more bold than mine. They predicted Commanders would win 35-32, much closer to the actual score of 45-31. That actually went down. Of course, the Washington Commanders getting the 14-point win, so eclipsing that plus 9.5 line by, 23.5 points, not that much. Total points scored 76. In fact, the Washington Commanders and Detroit Lions combined for 42 points in the second quarter, the most points scored in the second quarter in playoff history, and nearly eclipsed that over-under in just the second quarter alone. So clearly they hit the over on that whole thing. So that is what happened after what was supposed to happen. Now we get to our sustains and our improves. I also write these up for CommanderGameDay.com. So if you want to go read about them, you can do that over on that Sports Illustrated website. And we simply do this: player, play, and team, right? It was players before plays. Then we talk about the team, 3 things each, one from each of those categories that we want to sustain, one thing that we want to improve upon going into the NFC Championship game against Philadelphia Eagles. And the player that we're going to focus in here that we want to sustain or that we want to stash going into the NFC Championship game is Dyami Brown. And it is the second straight week that Dyami Brown has been the player that we would like to stash from this game moving on to the next one. I figured, look, it worked keeping him on there from the first week to this week. Let's go ahead and keep him there again, because the Washington Commanders have a true blue number 2 target. That makes things harder for the Philadelphia Eagles offense. It makes it harder for them to just focus in on Terry McLaurin and maybe focus in on Zach Ertz a little bit, really try to get after Jaden Daniels. If they've got to worry about another bona fide weapon out there like Dyami Brown, that's going to complicate things for Vic Fangio and his Philadelphia Eagles defense. And that's exactly what I'm hoping the Washington Commanders are going to be able to do this weekend in the NFC Championship game, is not only get Terry going, not only get Zach Ertz involved, maybe build on that running game that we saw come back to life with the running backs this last week in Detroit, but also continue to get Dyami Brown involved. Dyami Brown continue to be able to do good things, get open for his quarterback and make some big plays. Ended up with 6 catches for 98 yards and a long of 42 yards against the Detroit Lions. No touchdowns, so no scoring, unfortunately, for Dyami, but that's okay. We didn't necessarily need to see him get into the end zone in order for the Washington Commanders to come away with the victory, and that is on top of the game that he had against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, in that game, Dyami was able to come away with 89 yards receiving. He and Terry McLaurin matching yards production with 89 yards apiece, each of them also getting a touchdown. Dyami Brown able to be I don't know if I want to say a bigger impact in that game. I would say he was actually a bigger impact in the Lions game just because of the way that game flow went, the shootout and mentality of it. So having that second receiver come out there and get chunk yards and make these big plays. But you look at the 2 weeks combined, 89 yards in the first game, 40 or 98 yards in the second game. You got nearly 200 yards of receiving offense by Dyami Brown in these 2 games this postseason. Dyami Brown had less than 400 yards receiving in the entire regular season. Still a very good year for him, especially from a career perspective. Career highs in pretty much every category, I think, except for touchdown receptions. But when you look at the fact that Dyami was able to produce 300 yards of receiving offense this regular season in 16 games appeared, and then he's at 202 playoff games. Like I said, the moniker playoff Dyami, I'm kind of stealing that from former Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back Leonard Fournette, who got the nickname Playoff Lenny during his stretch with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I think it fits. Playoff Dyami certainly making a lot of sense here for the Washington Commanders. And then the play that we're going to talk about is going to be Mike Sainristil's first interception. He ended up with 2 interceptions on the game, but the play that we're going to pick the most that we want to see sustained moving into the NFC Championship game was his first interception in the game. It's teach tape. It is cornerback teach tape. Sainristil plays the situation perfectly. Doesn't just play the player, but also plays the situation absolutely perfect. 1st and 10 at the Washington 29, 35 seconds left in the first half. The Lions are down 10 points. So he knows the opponent. He knows they're going to try to score. They want to get a touchdown. They don't want to settle for a field goal. So they're going to take opportunities to try to get into the end zone. So knowing that, plays off coverage against Jameson Williams, takes outside leverage, never gets too far off of Jameson Williams' path, but never lets him get the leverage back either. And that's absolutely key. He's got no safety help over the top, so he stays on top of the route. And when Goff releases the ball, if the throw is deeper than Jameson Williams, Mike Sainristil is in perfect position to make a play. If it's short, then Mikey has the opportunity to come underneath it and make a play, potentially get in place for an interception, which is exactly what he does. What Williams wants to do, the receiver, is either get on top of Mikey Sainristil so that Goff can put the ball over him and he can use his longer frame to get the ball, or push him wider than he was so that he can flatten his post break and give Jared Goff more room to the inside of the field to throw the ball. But because he doesn't do either of those, because Mikey Sainristil's technique is so solid and sound, he's unable to, and Sainristil comes away with a huge takeaway at the end of the first half that keeps it a 2-score lead with the Washington Commanders getting the ball to start the second half. Of course, Dyami and Mikey weren't alone on Sunday. In fact, there were so many standout performances that the player performance we want to trash the most, leaving the divisional round, actually got some insider game ball votes. That's how good this Commanders team was on Sunday. We'll get into all of that next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today thanks in part to our friends over at Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year with my wife. The energy and excitement were unforgettable, and it was a night that we're never going to forget. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets, getting a little bit ahead of my planning for some summer music festivals using the Game Time app, and with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seats before buying. The super deal is particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout, so make sure you toggle that bad boy on when you get to the app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Dyami Brown and Mike Sainristil weren't alone on Sunday in having standout performances. In fact, there were so many standout performances that one player performance that we wanted to see get much better in the NFC Championship game actually earned that player some game ball votes. That's how good the Washington Commanders were by and large on Sunday against the Detroit Lions. We're going to talk about that here coming up here in just a bit, or Saturday against the Detroit Lions, my bad. We're going to talk about that here coming up. But if you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, all you got to do is become a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, you're going to get texts from me during games, practices, press conferences, all kinds of stuff inside information. You're also going to get access to our insider-only Zoom conferences where we get together as insiders and myself, and you get some access. You get access to information, and you can ask me questions directly that go well beyond the show. So again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to try it out for free for the first 2 weeks. So the team element of this win over the Detroit Lions, we want to sustain moving into the NFC Championship game against Philadelphia Eagles, has to be the 5 takeaways, right? That's low-hanging fruit, but it's such ripe fruit that we got to go ahead and pick it. It's the second time this season that the Washington Commanders defense came away with multiple interceptions after finishing the season +1 in turnover margin. We talk about the amazing games that Dyami Brown has had and the amazing production that Dyami has had here in these 2 postseason games. The Washington Commanders are +6 this postseason, tied for the league lead with the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, they're also, the Commanders are one of 3 teams this postseason that have yet to turn the ball over. Knock on wood that we don't curse that. Of course, the Commanders, one of those teams. The Eagles, also one of those teams. And the Buffalo Bills, one of those teams. So we're going to see a matchup between the Commanders and Eagles that have typically been very clean on offense, but have also been very opportunistic, I should say, on the defensive side of the ball. So we'll see if any of that comes to roost on either side of things. Certainly want to see the Washington Commanders continue the takeaway side, continue the protecting the ball side of that equation moving out of the divisional round. So those are the 3 things we want to see sustained, the 3 things that we want to stash from the divisional round performance heading into the NFC Championship game. Now let's get into the 3 things that we want to trash, the 3 things that we want to improve upon. And again, always got to say this player disclaimer. When I talk about trashing Frankie Luvu, I don't mean trashing him as a human being or as a player, cut him, none of that stuff. But what I want to see is a better version of Frankie Luvu coming into the NFC Championship game. And I know it's going to sound a little bit weird to some of you, especially because he got game ball votes this week. However, he did miss 3 tackles against the Detroit Lions. That's the most missed tackles Frankie Luvu has had since week 8 versus the Chicago Bears, which was another game where the opposing team was able to have a 100-yard rusher. Only 5 times in the regular season did the Commanders give up a 100-plus yard rusher. Week 8 against Chicago Bears was one of them. That was Frankie Luvu's highest game in regards to missed tackles before this one. Now, obviously, they're tied. So the 2 things don't directly correlate. I'm not putting 100-yard rushers on Frankie Luvu by himself, but Frankie is such an important part of this team that even having 3 missed tackles, even having a good game, but having those 3 missed tackles, you got to get better out of him for the NFC Championship game. So it's not a matter of Frankie Luvu playing poorly. It's a matter of Frankie Luvu needing to be on his A game every snap for the Washington Commanders defense to really have great success moving forward. At least that's kind of the bar that we've set for him here on the show. Also did have 8 tackles, including 2 stops, which remember, stops are run tackles that either resulted in a failed 3rd down or 4th down conversion for the opponent. So 8 tackles, including 2 stops, was targeted 5 times by the Lions in the passing game, allowed 5 catches for 64 yards. So you want to see him get better there. Got 2 quarterback hurries, and of course the fumble recovery, which was a big moment in this game. So as bad games go, not really a bad game for Frankie Luvu, but I do believe the Commanders need a better performance out of Frankie Luvu going into the NFC Championship game, certainly past that going to the Super Bowl if they're going to come away with the Lombardi Trophy. So Frankie Luvu getting our improved player of the week here. Our improve upon play, the Jameson Williams 61-yard touchdown run. Everybody on this run, and we talked about this before the game, we talked about Ben Johnson and his trickery, his sleight of hand, how important it was going to be for this Washington Commanders defense to stay disciplined, stay home, stay in your assignment. This play right here really was the quintessential Ben Johnson trickery play that got the Washington Commanders out of position. That one and maybe the shuffle pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I went between those 2, but this is the one I ultimately went with. Everybody flows to the left side of the defensive formation when the ball goes to Jahmyr Gibbs and is caught completely unprepared, out of position when Williams gets the ball on the reverse. Now, beyond that, that's the initial bad side, right? But you get bad backside pursuit angles from several 2nd and 3rd level players who try to make a straight line angle to Williams instead of getting upfield, understanding how fast this dude is to cap the gain. You're still going to get a big gain on the play, but you can at least cap it, live to play another down. What makes matters even worse is that in the moment, the defense doesn't really learn from their mistakes. And as Williams is running down the left sideline of the field, the downfield pursuers all beeline to the sideline. Nobody stays in the field of play. Nobody stays inside and gives Jameson Williams yet another avenue to change direction and gives him a clear path to the end zone. So instead of squeezing him out of bounds, the defenders get stacked up in front of him, and it leaves him a wide open back cut into the middle of the field, into the end zone to get that critical score there. So again, that play, not a lot of good defense there, not a lot of good pursuit angles there. Certainly going to be one that's teach tape for a different reason on what not to do. And obviously you're going to need to see things like that because there right now, if you're Kellen Moore of the Philadelphia Eagles, you don't run a lot of trickeration, I think, in Philly. But I think if you see stuff like that working against the Commanders defense, you might try to install it. You might just pull it out here once or twice against the Washington Commanders this weekend. As a team, want to see their third down percentages go up as an offense. 4 for 12 on third downs against the Detroit Lions. That's only a 33% conversion rate, and 33% is kind of the floor. Like 33% conversion rates on third down is 70% completion rates for quarterbacks. It's not terrible. It's not, you're not going to look at it and say, oh, well, that's why you lost the game, but you definitely need to get better in there. Now, the good news is Washington Commanders were 3 for 4 on fourth downs, which is great. They had a fifth fourth down they were going to go for. Troy Lions, they called for a penalty, so it gets converted for them, but 3 for 4 on actual fourth downs that they went for. But 8 of the 12 third downs that the Commanders faced in this game were from 5 or more yards out. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, the importance of winning on first down or even second down to get to an advantageous third down. Commanders not doing nearly enough of that against the Detroit Lions. The Philadelphia Eagles defense is another hard one. We know that because we've seen these two teams play twice this year, plus the Eagles' reputation kind of precedes them. Jalen Carter is going to be going up against a backup right guard with Sam Cosmi lost for the season. So it's going to be incredibly important for this Washington Commanders team to not just convert the third downs, but do well on first and second downs to make the third downs convertible, because as much as you love converting on fourth downs, as much as you love how successful this team has been converting on fourth downs, it only takes one game where you're not that good at converting on fourth downs to really derail the whole thing. So you got to get better on first and second downs, got to prevent the need to convert the long third downs, and you got to prevent the need to go for it on fourth downs at least as much. I mean, 5 times, again, that 5th time in the Lions game was negated by a Detroit Lions penalty, so you like that. But 10 times total, the Washington Commanders offense lined up to go for it on fourth down. Again, good thing is they converted 7 of them. So I mean, that's one heck of a conversion rate. But let's get a little bit of that conversion rate going on third down, make this a little bit less stressful. So again, our 3 sustains: play, player, and team. We want to sustain Dyami Brown for a second straight week going into the NFC Championship game. We want to sustain Mike Sainristil's teach tape coverage of Jameson Williams in one-on-one man coverage down the field to get the interception at the end of the first half. And we want to sustain the team having 5 takeaways and also protecting the ball on the offensive side. On the improved side, we want to see Frankie Luvu had a good game, relatively speaking, but for Frankie Luvu standards, want to see it even better in the NFC Championship game. We want to see the discipline, the eye discipline, the pursuit angles, all of that stuff get even better compared to what it was, especially on that Jameson Williams 61-yard touchdown run. And we want to see the offense's third down conversion rate go up in the next round compared to the divisional round. Frankie Luvu, despite making the list as our player that needs to improve next week, got some game ball votes, but he did not get the Insider Fam game ball. Who did? And how Coach Quinn flexed his leadership muscles with running back Brian Robinson Jr. this weekend. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. It is playoff time. And if you're like me, you want to get the most out of these final weeks of NFL action. And that is where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stat projections like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. I've been playing for a while now. I am one of those millions of members. I have tens of those billions of winnings. So I'm going to be playing again this weekend. So join me. It's a lot of fun. If you want to give it a shot, here's a special offer for you. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks. Run your game. Frankie Luvu was our player that needs to improve from the NFC divisional round to the NFC championship game. However, he still got some game ball votes. That is how high the standard is set for linebacker Frankie Luvu. Did not get the insider fan game ball, however. Who did? I'll tell you that here in a minute, but we're going to first start with Dan Quinn, who flexed his leadership muscles again, this time with running back Brian Robinson Jr. So B-Rob had some struggles recently in the running game, not doing very well. Certainly a far cry from the early Brian Robinson we were talking about, where we were talking about this Commanders team as saying you need to get Brian Robinson established quickly, early, and then off of that, adjust to what the defense has to do in order to try to stop him. Lately, it's been a lack of Brian Robinson, more Austin Eckler after he came back off of IR, and a lot of Jaden Daniels, who ended up leading the team in rushing by the end of the regular season. But on Saturday, I keep wanting to say Sunday, on Saturday against the Detroit Lions, Brian Robinson, 15 carries, 77 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, 2 rushing touchdowns on the day, a very solid performance by Brian Robinson. And we talked about it leading into the Detroit Lions game. This Detroit Lions run defense, yards per game given up on the ground, not very good as far as opponents are concerned, but yards per carry, that's where the vulnerability came in. We talked about the Lions giving up an average of 4 yards per carry up the middle, 4.1 yards per carry on the outside. And Brian Robinson, this Washington Commanders offense, was able to take advantage of that. Again, B-Rob alone, 5.1 yards per carry, 2 rushing touchdowns. But he wasn't alone overall in the production standpoint. For the Washington Commanders, Jaden Daniels chipped in 51 rushing yards. Austin Eckler had 47 on 6 carries. That's a 7.8 yard per carry rushing average. That's disgusting and in a good way. Jeremy McNichols, only 8 yards on 4 carries, but he also had a touchdown, very tough running touchdown to help the Washington Commanders get that win. So you love seeing that out of Jeremy McNichols. But here's what Dan Quinn's had to say. So after one of those plays, you see Brian Robinson on the television broadcast come over the sideline. Dan Quinn embraces him. They kind of talk for a minute. Obviously, a lot of encouraging going on. Dan Quinn was asked by Chick Hernandez at WSA 9 what was said in that moment. He said, quote, "We had watched some film together, just he and I on Thursday night, and just recapturing the essence of him and what it looks like and how to do that." And so it was just a reminder of that meeting that we had and all it stood for. And I knew he was really ready to go battle for it and to get our run game going again. That's a big piece of what we do. And it's been stuck here for a few weeks. And so to get it unstuck was a big deal. And he was right in the front and center of that, end quote. Absolutely love seeing Brian Robinson get his groove back, to say lightly. Hoping to see him be able to do that against Philadelphia Eagles once again here on Sunday afternoon in the NFC Championship game. My game ball, though, is going to go to Joe Whitt Jr. Defensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders, has been talking to us all year about making sure his guys are ready for every matchup, that he was ready as a coach for every matchup. And not only was he ready, and look, I know the Detroit Lions put up over 30 points, but listen, 5 takeaways does not happen by mistake. Joe Whitt Jr. had his guys ready. There were some moments of trickeration the Lions got away with. Absolutely. There were some opportunities that Jahmyr Gibbs got in the running game. Absolutely. But when it came down to the critical moments, again, Mike Sainristil fully ready and prepared, understanding who the Lions are, understanding who his coverage assignment was, understanding what the quarterback liked to do. That is coaching to a T. And then Mikey deserves a lot of credit. Don't get me wrong. Not trying to take anything away from him, but it's a team effort. It's a collaborative. The coach is showing that stuff on tape, sets him up to do those kinds of things. The ability to not get caught out of position when Jamison Williams then tries to throw a pass later, Mikey Sainristil comes up with an interception. The play where Quan Martin comes with an interception, look, it looks like a very simple, Jared Goff overthrew it, Quan Martin was there to make the catch. But what you don't see unless you look at the all-22 and really diagnose it is that it's a play where Quan Martin sees Jared Goff going underneath to Tim Patrick. What a lot of safeties do in that point is they come downhill super aggressively because they want to make a hit on Tim Patrick. But Quan Martin knows from studying, Quan Martin knows from his coaches coaching him that sometimes those balls sail on Jared Goff. So if I'm Quan Martin on them deep, I'm going to let my underneath teammates rally for the tackle. I'm going to stay back. I'm not going to get super aggressive, and I'm going to see if that ball comes to me. It does come to him. He's in perfect position, and then the run back to get back into the end zone. A lot of coaching going into this, a lot of scheme adjustment, a lot of zone, a lot of 2 high safety, even 3 deep sometimes. The Washington Commanders played a defense against the Detroit Lions that really kind of goes against Joe Whitt Jr.'s mantra, Dan Quinn's personality of uber aggressive, always attacking, always attacking. They said, you know what, we are going to attack you, but we're going to attack you by sitting back, letting your scheme unfold in front of us and reacting to everything that's happening. And then we'll attack at the right moment instead of just pedal to the floor nonstop, just speed rushing and overly aggressive. So I think Joe Whitt Jr., very, very good, very smart plan of attack for his defense to counter that Ben Johnson offense. Even though Ben Johnson, again, they did get away with some things, but overall, when it mattered the most, Joe Whitt Jr.'s scheme stood up to the test. Insider game ball goes to Mikey Sainristil. 2 interceptions in this game, very key interceptions. 1 interception at the late end of the first half to keep points off the board there. Another interception again on that Jamison Williams pass play attempt. I was shocked that he threw the ball. Mikey was shocked that he threw the ball, but hey, he threw the ball and Mikey went up there and made the best of it. Quan Martin and John Allen tied for second. I think John Allen is someone who deserves a lot of praise for this game that I don't know he's been getting a lot of from everybody, including myself. So we'll give him some credit. Really stood up for this team, I think, in some of the crucial moments. Austin Eckler, the ownership getting some love, just the ownership group. People are just so in awe of what the Commanders have been able to accomplish this season, even if they don't win the NFC Championship game, that they're already wanting to give ownership. Adam Peters included game ball there. Frankie Luvu, like I said, he got some game ball love. Terry McLaurin, of course. Jaden Daniels, of course. Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore got some votes, and every single vote for Marshawn Lattimore mentioned the Mikey Sainristil interceptions don't happen. The Quan Martin interception doesn't happen if Marshawn Lattimore is not locking down his side and forcing those passes to go to the other side. And I think that's a very astute point. Dyami Brown, of course, got some game ball love. Also, Trent Scott coming in for Sam Cosme, and really nobody noticing that Trent Scott was in there against that Detroit Lions defense, getting some love from the insiders as well. But Mikey Sainristil ultimately comes away with our divisional round insider Locked On Commanders game ball. So congrats to Mikey Sainristil. And you guys don't know this necessarily, but I actually do tell these players when they win these game ball votes, and to a man, they're always very appreciative to hear that the fans are showing them some love for their game-to-game performances. That's going to wrap up our after-action review of the divisional round game against the Detroit Lions. In our next episode of Locked On Commanders, we're going to talk about what we've learned from this last game from the Washington Commanders, how they'll apply to the matchup against Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to officially turn the page to our Philadelphia Eagles game here coming up as we prepare for our crossover Thursday episode with Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text me. To do that, all you got to do is become a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Now check out the Locked On NFL podcast for your next listen. The Madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off in the morning. And then in the afternoon, it's the Barbershop Vibes with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, please be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.